Welcome back, everybody, to the podcast that refuses to sober up and get its life together. This is the Loud and Drunk Podcast. And Justin, I haven't seen you guys in a while. So, how have you guys been?
You know what, Dad? We've been all right, but where the hell have you been?
Well, I took a nice little trip to the motherland, and that is Ireland for me.
I was going to say Africa, but...
Well, we'll get...
I mean, I could bless the rains down in Africa, but, I don't know if I have enough rhythm to do that.
You don't.
I'm not in Toto.
I mean, we're not in Kansas.
Oh, that's racist. Sorry.
Moses, how you doing?
I am shut out. It was a long couple of weekends of heavy drinking. And amongst other words I can't say on the podcast in the first 20 seconds. So,
Yeah, there are rules here.
Yeah. What are the rules?
What are the rules?
And you will notice, because you're watching this on YouTube or Rumble, I guess if you don't like YouTube, so you might be watching this on Rumble, we have a guest. So, Pedro, would you like to introduce our guest?
I would love to. This is Ed. He's a prominent homosexual in our community, and he is here to represent everybody. Am I just doing this right? Is that correct?
I mean, I just found out I'm gay, but yes, I am a prominent homosexual.
That's fair
What's
enough.
that like?
Yeah.
Are you single? Are any of you men single?
Sorry.
Oh shit.
Yeah, my car's full.
Hey, Ed, after the podcast, let's talk.
Ed is here. I don't know his sexual proclivities, though I do believe that I described them accurately, and that's something that, indeed, you guys can describe to yourselves after the fact. But Ed is here to discuss the history of drinking, I thought that was an aspect.
And for those of you that have maybe been with us for a little while, he has been on the podcast before.
Yes.
This is the first time in this video medium that we do now.
So you get to see him. It's great.
That's delightful.
What is drinking?
The history of drinking.
But what is drinking?
Well, we
What's
can
that
get
to you?
into that.
No, I guess what is it to you?
But before we get started, I want to talk about our sponsor. This episode of the Loud and Drunk Podcast is brought to you by alcohol, the cause of and solution to all of life's problems.
Cheers to that.
What do
Thank you.
This
I
episode?
have 2 drinks right now.
Well, I mean, I'll
You have
just-
3 drinks.
Cheers.
My typical, and I'm not even really a beer drinker, but when we do the podcast, I drink some beer. So I got some Stella, Anno 1366, evidently, and some Brooklotti. Scotch.
Brooklotti is delicious.
Yeah.
No.
Pedro, what are you drinking?
I have right now, I don't, so one of the cups that I'm drinking from is a bit of a question mark. And I believe that there's some element of like a whiskey in here mixed with whatever it was that
We're doing the doo-doo. It's a scotch, doer scotch, and Mountain Dew.
Okay. And that by itself is actually something that was brought up before, because apparently this is like an old-fashioned drink that people used to imbibe.
That is what Mountain Dew was originally created for. It was meant as a mixer for traditionally whiskey, but I believe they would mix it with other alcohols,
Yeah.
like
So-
moonshines and such.
That's the reason I'm drinking this. On the other hand, my other cup is filled with wine because I have to hydrate. so I've got 2 of them going on. It's going pretty well so far.
That's
I can't really knock it.
What's
No.
that third cup? What's that for?
The third cup is empty, but honestly, that really upsets me, and I feel like we need to
It's
do some
just a
things on that.
representation of opportunity.
Oh my God, I love your positive attitude. I really do.
That was well said.
No, that's
I like it.
mescaline.
Oh, is that just me?
Yeah,
No.
What are you sipping on?
I have a little bit of wine,
A little vino.
a little Cabernet Sauvignon.
Ooh,
Yeah.
fancy.
In fairness,
I can make it fancy.
I did fill his cup up to the very top, to the tippy tip.
I drink this when I don't want to be too drunk because I don't want to ruin the podcast by drinking too much and being a mess.
Well,
Why?
while I appreciate your sentiment, you got big boots to fill.
Yeah.
You underestimate my capacity for being a screw-up.
And Moses, what about you?
I also have the doo-doo and a good old standby Pabst. Doing a tall boy of that this time.
I'm just going to jump in real quick because I was in the car with you when you stopped and picked up your stuff for doo-doo. I am just noticing now it is Mountain Dew 0.
Well, I got one of those just because, as a responsible diabetic who drinks uncontrollably, You want to keep your sugars down where you can.
How much sugar is in a Pabst Blue Ribbon?
Probably more than I should have. But here I go.
Who's to say?
So also want to encourage you to subscribe to this podcast, give us a like, and also you can follow us on social media. We are on X, but we're also on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. And, if you're also listening to this, we're on Apple, Spotify, so give us a subscribe.
Yep.
And you can also comment on YouTube, whether you just hate Pete and his sunglasses, or...
People do.
I do.
Yeah.
Is it the sunglasses or is it just you?
It might be the sunglasses, but we'll test that theory.
Ooh.
Yeah. Oh.
Oh, for the first time ever, I'm feeling left out.
Yeah.
Nah, well, these are prescriptions, so I can still see.
That's why I'm here.
All right, gentlemen.
To answer your question, it's 4 grams of sugar.
Did I ask that?
Not yours, his.
Yeah, I did. Thank you for informing me.
So it's hard to tell when you're 20 with sunglasses on.
Oh, do I have them on?
Yes, you do. All right,
I
gentlemen.
do.
I thought it was very fitting that we wanted to talk about the history of drinking.
Yeah.
Because right around the time that this idea was floated out, I was on the way to not the birthplace of drinking, but it's damn close.
It holds its level. I don't know a better way to put that, but it's definitely a country that we all attribute to.
Egypt.
That's interesting that you say that.
He's not wrong.
He's not wrong.
Yeah.
Because
Just that alone.
on one of the road trips that I was on, I took the time to. I got this book way back in the day. It's the comic book story of beer. It's supposed to tell the history of beer. And if we're talking about the history of drinking, then you got to start at beer. And beer is very interesting because there's no real
There's
a
no
certain point. There's no they don't know when it was actually created.
because essentially it's prehistory.
Exactly. Yeah. If I may chime in on that,
Yes.
and get to ever so rarely get to enjoy the degree that I have in history.
Start the timer.
Can we start it now?
Yeah. 30 seconds on the clock. Yeah.
General, it's almost a mythology because indeed, as you said, there's no definitive way to know when that began. However, the most dominant theories as to how beer came about was very simply that people left the relevant grains inside of, whatever their container was at the time. And it became that. And they recognized not only the value of it in terms of inebriation, but also the value of it in terms of how it makes clean water, which is really what we would describe beer as at the time.
At the time, yes. But it would be, by today's standards, quite low.
Yeah, you're talking about a 2 or 3% beer that you can accidentally make from natural
for
yeast.
that iteration.
Yeah,
And
it's a natural yeast.
as far as I know, too, that beer, which is actually not really even beer, is sort of like an ancestor of what would eventually become beer.
Yeah, it's a very light ale.
Effectively, it was just gruel. And it just eventually just got effectively wild or just airborne yeast attached to it because it was not able to be properly stored and cooled and all that.
Yeah, it's basically that's all that it was. It was that it was grain that water got into it either because of your own choice or because it rained that
Environment.
day. Yeah, exactly.
Circumstance.
And with just a little bit of time, it became that. In other words, beer forms naturally.
Yeah.
Naturally, in the way of what it was an accident.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a beer you or I would know today. It was actually like an oatmeal.
Yeah.
And people would drink it through straws.
Yeah.
So
I didn't know the straw part.
I do drink beer through a straw when I'm looking to get,
Because originally it was like a beer mash. So you would have an oatmeal type consistency because it was wheat, it was yeast, it fermented, it became a beer-like substance which had a little bit of alcohol. And that's how people would imbibe it. And they needed the straws because you need to separate the solids from the liquid. So that's how you would imbibe it.
Oh, that's incredibly interesting. I always missed that part, I guess.
so that would have a filter in it to...
the straws would keep the
straw
solid twigs.
basically acts as the filter. So it would be like what would you call it? Like a grain chute. Something like that you might use as a straw to do that.
The thing I love about
So you're not sucking down, oatmeal in that.
The thing I love about it though is that there had to be a first guy that had to look at some yeast and wheat or some wheat sitting out in a field that got wet, yeast grew, and then that guy had to legitimately eat it and then get drunk.
Well, you feel like, well, it's what I have.
I'm hungry, so let me eat some.
I felt like that would be you. That you would be that guy who would just eat the wet wheat.
Well,
get drunk.
Fun fact, it was me.
That wouldn't surprise me.
I was in Egypt all those years ago.
That absolutely tracks.
So, mentioning all of that, guys, I was actually, through this book, learned of something called beer theory. It's actually, the more formal name is beer before bread hypothesis, which the real history of it, the theory, the hypothesis is we didn't stop as a species. We stopped from being hunter-gatherers, not to do agriculture for bread, but to do so for beer. So I wanted to ask you guys what you thought of this potential idea, because for the most part, like, in order to, as we just discussed, to get this beer, you kind of needed the bread, or at least the ingredients for bread first. So I'm curious what you guys think of this.
Grain.
Is it like a chicken, or like what came first, the chicken or the egg?
Well,
kind of
there
thing?
is no definitive answer for either one. So it is kind of like that.
We will not find a definitive answer in this conversation tonight. But it is a very interesting thing, and it could have some legs to it, because, like, if the act of making bread itself goes even farther than just having grain, that you probably just had grains in your diet.
Yeah.
Once you get into the beginnings of our agricultural cells, where your grain goes off, and you either get like aren't poisoning, or it works out right, and you get some fermented low ABV concoction.
I'll say this to chime in on it.
Yeah.
It's that the methodology by which people created these things, let's say, it's that you had to have, presumably, you created beer and the other alcohols that humans created. That presumably happened accidentally, and therefore you would have already been making it. Or you would have been gathering it in some way.
Yeah.
So, in other words, like, the alcohol part of it would have been secondary. That said, the alcohol part of it is clearly a huge benefit to any society that figured out how to do it, because all of a sudden you have clean water, which, once again, for anybody who drinks Miller Lite, as I occasionally do these days,
I'm sorry.
that is, I know, I feel bad for myself too. That's clean water. Whereas when you're talking about basically cultures that existed in antiquity, the standard would be that if you were a poor person, then you wouldn't have access to that. You would drink what we would call today, basically like natural water that had its flaws, let's say.
Of course, yeah.
And so therefore you were susceptible to all of the, diseases and so on and so forth.
With all its amazing minerality and stuff, you sometimes got botulism.
Right, exactly. Yes, there's a trade-off there. And so basically cleaning the water by virtue of having alcohol in it, more or less turning it into beer, you were getting all of the benefits of it by not removing all of those minerals, elements. But you're not increasing the alcohol enough to where you're being dehydrated. You can just drink that fucking beer all day, and so therefore
Which
you
is
have
what they would use.
Yeah, you have basically just clean water. And when you look at antiquity, even going back to not even that long ago, if you look at like ancient Rome and what have you, you're talking about a culture that was drinking wine all the time. They would just water down their wine.
That was my question. Like, what was first? Was it the beer or the wine?
Well, beer.
Just because
the beer has, like, as everybody said too, it's a prehistoric thing. We can't account for it.
Unaccountable. So, like, with what we're
wine
talking
is
about
better
conceptually, likely happened in many places around the world in like Neolithic ages.
Yeah.
So, like, even before like Bronze Age, any of that stuff, it's not a lightning bolt moment. It's kind of over time, and it's like things get kind of figured out. And when you get a little bit, as alcohol has a tendency to do, even in small doses, when it has altering properties, it would often be something that would then go into ritual.
Yeah,
no,
exactly.
Other states
to try and
Neolithic times.
to get closer to God or God,
or
whoever you believe in.
Understanding, whether it be nature, gods.
Yeah. There's a psychological effect that comes with the very tangible medical effect of how it can basically, protect you from the things that exist in water naturally.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, we then tend to view it in this way.
And I do have a counter argument for you guys in that in countries where grain was the predominant agricultural product, you would have more beer. In countries where,
particularly in the European areas and stuff like that,
you would, but also that does not mean in the prehistory aspect of it too that there weren't other beers, because the quote unquote beers of prehistory, there were some in China and they were just made out of rice.
Yeah.
And there were some in South America, as far as I know, and they were made out of corn. So it was just the different ingredients.
or in the Mediterranean, you would have more of your traditional wines.
Yeah.
You have these conflicts.
Stuff like that, yes.
And there was a nice little, and you'll love this, Pete, nice little socioeconomic difference between a wine drinker in Greece and your beer drinker, because the beer drinkers would be labeled as barbarians, because they were more of a low class thing in Greece and Rome and Italy, all those places were kind of they were the empires at the time.
It was made to keep them docile and hydrated while they're building whatever they're building for the rich.
That's actually quite true too, because I think that was one of the things they mentioned in that book as well, is that you were actually paid. I think it might have been for the pyramids. I might be misremembering this.
I think that's where I read
paid in beer to do that.
Yes, it is. Well, with anything with ancient Egypt, always take it with a grain of salt, because nothing is really provable.
Yeah.
But we have transitioned from the thing of them being slaves to actually skilled workers who were often, paid in beer and their proto bread and stuff like that.
I thought they were aliens.
You brought up something I that's actually pretty exciting, is that Caesar said, even though in Rome, wine was the predominant drink.
Yeah.
Because in the Mediterranean, grapes were predominant. You didn't grow as much grain as you did grapes. Mm-hmm. He felt that the Germans were actually limited by the fact when they became wine drinkers, they became more effeminate. So even though, because up there, they were more beer drinkers. So he felt by introducing wine made them more effeminate, even though his soldiers were fed wine.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. I was not aware of that individual little nuance.
It's also why Romans believed that having a small dick was better, because to have a big dick was barbarian.
Yes, yeah. Well, that's which is that's a fact.
And honestly,
That's how it is.
And honestly, in combat, I felt the small dick would be better because less the stab.
It depends on what kind of combat.
Yeah, without diving too far into that, if one could choose when you would like to have a big or a small penis, I would like to chime in.
That's just the tip of the iceberg.
And that's why I drink.
But it is funny, and you can jump around, and largely what I know happens to do is I watched Time Team for a million fucking years. I know mostly what happened in Anglo England and in Germany and stuff like that, but it was also happening in China. Yeah, and that was more fermentation of rice as opposed to the standard old grains,
which we would call a sake today.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. And but we're not even getting into. This is all fermentation era. Distillation came later for alcohol.
Yeah. Well, so with that, I think that's the interesting thing. It's that, so we kind of addressed the origination of it. And then you have how that was perfectly acceptable to every human being on the planet for thousands of years, that we would drink. It was standard. You would even give your children, basically a low proof beer.
Low beers,
and that was considered
a small beer.
Yeah.
Lower alcohol content.
Exactly. Yeah. Not only was it acceptable, but it's what you should do, right? And then you see the mood shift for all of the reasons that moods shift, amongst humanity and what have you. And then you can bring that forward into all of the different time periods that followed. Now, getting into the notion of distillation and what have you, that was 600.
Oh, that's a big jump.
That's a giant jump. Yeah, distillation was, that happened in 600, because that was the Persian Empire.
Persians,
Yeah, which most people don't even think about. Yeah. And that was arguably the time period, more or less, where people began to question the validity of giving alcohol to children, because all of a sudden you just raised the proof. You had something which was really good yesterday, but you just made it stronger and now it's a bad thing, which by itself is just such an interesting and just notion.
And also the amount of time it took for distillation to go from Persia to China to the European we're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yeah.
At least with like clear spirits, getting into the 1500s in Northern Europe for actual distillation, like proto gins and stuff like Jennifer in like say like Amsterdam, the Dutch areas and stuff like that.
You're talking about 1000 AD.
Yeah.
And the challenge with distillation is because the thing I love about the history of alcohol, when you guys were like talking about it, is that every culture has done it.
Yeah.
Every person on the planet or civilization on the planet has loved drinking.
Yeah.
They found their own way to have it.
It's almost as an inevitability.
Yeah, it's 100%. It's even more important than religion, but I'm not going to go into that.
Hey, there you go. You got to be pretty drunk to come up with a religion.
When it became distillation, it became a product, and then you could ship it, and then you could send to other cultures, and that's when it started to take over. So, like you said, when people were distilling, you made a product that had a higher alcohol content, and then you could like send to other places. Typically, beers and alcohols with lower like alcohol values wouldn't survive. They wouldn't make a trip.
No.
When you could distill it, you could send it. You could make it a product. And that's when governments got involved.
Yep.
And I mean, that's a whole other thing, but that's really the tipping point. That's when alcohol went from being fun to really being a
and that's
Also, like shipping, like going overseas to like having something on board.
It's what kept the slave trade going. You know, that's what
Huge part of the slave trade.
Yeah. And it is so interesting. I love this point that you brought up. It's that basically the originations of it are that you made your own beer and you made your own wine. And that was just considered a thing that people did. And the same was you cook for yourself.
You know,
it was considered
too was back in the day. It wasn't that you made the beer. It was so much so for beer. It was that the women made the beer.
100%. Yep.
That is the origination of what the pub was.
Yeah.
Because the pub was just a short version of public house.
It was an outhouse.
Yeah. So the women would make the beer and the men would be like, oh, shit, this is really good, and invite their friends over. And it eventually would become, and this is my hypothesis for this episode, it becomes like, not the modern day, but we still live in the modern day, so it is like that, the campfire.
Well,
because the campfire is where you would exchange ideas, and that slowly became
and also depending where you were, is like, so in early anglicized like England, like say the 10 to 1100s, it would largely be the monks.
Yeah.
That would be their bread and butter, if you will.
Yeah.
With a quart of Ballantine.
Yeah.
The monks, I think, had a whole different structure to it too.
Well, they did, because they had loaves, but they would also at that point in time would be able to create like, not necessarily heavies like we know heavies today, but like a gradation of beer, and where the lows would be gone, but like the heavies would be used even though it was Catholicism ritualistically.
Yeah,
but also they would structure their monasteries, so to speak, to have areas where, like, all right, this is the spot where like the monks will drink. This is the spot where like the travelers will come in and have a drink, and then I forget the third spot. There was a third spot for like
the monks
like
when he travels. That's actually a hospital. That's what the word hospital comes from. It's hospitality.
The hospice. Yeah.
And the church has always had a really big struggle with alcohol. Because one of its biggest tenets is that Jesus could turn water into wine, which I wish I could. I can't. And it's part of the sacrament, so the church can never separate from
especially
alcohol.
the Catholic Church.
So they taught temperance, but they could never break away from it.
Nope. Well, not you. Well, yeah. Some
just like me.
Amen, brother. Well, yeah, we're far off from the temperance. Well, those ladies and their hammers. But yeah, I mean, it's such an interesting thing. I am, for myself, like I said, most of what I got is because I learned mostly about European history growing up. And I have since learned that, like, X amount, like, especially China, for sure. But we know for sure Egypt. in Persia, particularly around the beginning of distillation.
Yeah, Persia would have Persia originated distillation around roughly like in the late maybe like 700 AD.
Yeah, around there.
Yeah,
and it's very interesting because it's something that largely humans always want something to slightly alter the world around them.
Yeah. Well, also that's, I mean, and this is just a general conversation about like drugs and the things that we use to like alter.
Oh yeah, animals do that shit too.
Exactly.
And dolphins eating puffer fish, and
it's that what makes alcohol. That's 100% true, and I do like routinely introduce that into debates when I have that with XYZ person about the way in which humans engage in these behaviors where you're very much so like altering your mind state because you simply want to, and we frown upon it for the most part as human beings. It's like the idea of more or less why do you need to be this separated from everything, so on and so forth. And some of us cast judgment. I think that everybody does to a degree. The government does to the maximum degree. And that's where we find ourselves. And certainly the counter argument would be that all animals do this. But I look back on the way in which humans have always done this, that humans, for as long as we have history, and then from like oral tales that go on even beyond that humans have always done this. What makes alcohol unique is that it's so commonplace. It's that alcohol is something that is regular, not just for Americans, but I think that it's so easily imbibed by your average human being that you can even extrapolate it beyond, just like a government, or a company.
It's easily accessible.
Yeah.
It's easy to access.
Exactly. And it's easy to consume.
Beings, we potentially had it for like 12,000 years plus.
Yeah. And some things, and don't get me wrong, there's many other types of, ways that people get high, essentially.
Yeah.
Ayahuasca, any kind of hallucinogen.
People have been getting high for as long as there have been people.
On legitimately poisonous plants in the right dose.
Yeah.
That could even potentially be the precursor to a beer. It was just spiking their water with hallucinogens.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
Or finding a piece of fruit that's fermented.
Right, yeah.
Monkeys.
Well, that's preserved. Yeah, monkeys.
Or just
absolutely.
having ergot poisoning and
Makes me
killing
feel a little
you.
good. I'm going to go back to it.
The ease of it and the predictability of it when you're consuming it by virtue of drinking it. That's the thing that makes alcohol unique, because you have so many effects that are, and as somebody who's done a fair amount of shrooms in my time, that's something where you consume it and it's not always predictable because of the variability in the actual substance itself.
It's a case-by-case basis, whereas a generalization of alcohol that can be judged in some
when you're
way or
talking
another.
about alcohol, the ethanol in it is readily measured even by someone who's living 10,000 years ago. They can tell you what that is. And that's something that's very unique to that particular type of drug. And this explains so much of the reasoning behind why it's so popular, why it's always been popular, and why that hasn't changed.
Something to think about is to try to put yourself in the shoes of a human being, we'll say 10,000 years ago, when you don't know anything about the world. You don't have reason why the weather is. I think humans always generally try to attribute and figure out reason why.
Yeah.
That's why a lot of, like in the Neolithic and pre-Neolithic times, you find a lot of ritual stuff trying to appease forces.
Yeah.
And you were trying to understand, so that's why altered states, like there's a lot of stuff. They find stuff for like these proto-peoples, mushrooms of all sorts, proto-alcohols, beers, if you will, anything to try to understand the natural world and why it operates.
And also
we
just
still
to
do
get
that
by into their natural environments, like the cocoa leaves in Colombia. And, like you chew on that to get through, the going up the high mountain for altitude sickness and whatnot.
And that's another aspect of it as well. It's that that with a lot of these things, there's a purification element that exists
And a survivability of it.
Well, yeah. And when we're talking about a lot of like modern drugs, then you're talking about something which is very purified. So like to use your example, you've got coca leaves, right? That's a thing by itself.
Yeah, you can feel an effect just chewing on the leaf.
Modern humans make it into
something
very purified powder that is very enjoyable on occasion, but we
Mostly
make
weekends.
it. We may settle down, but we make it into that. But we don't make it into that because that's the better version of it. We make it into that because that's the version of it that you can cross borders with.
And
So
it's also a different version of it.
well, that's what I mean, is that it's a completely different version of the thing. With alcohol, for whatever reason, and I think for the reasons that we're describing to a degree, this is a version of this drug which is really never needed to be purified further. Humans enjoy it for what it is. Which is
But we
But there
but
is
we
also,
have
like,
purified it.
absinthe.
we have the purified version, but for 10,000 years.
But absinthe is an alcohol that has the property, like it has wormwood, which has the hallucinogenic properties.
Yeah, Fujo.
But you know, they kind of combine two things. I don't know whether naturally
a lot
or
of political reason why
absinthe is banned, but
was ostracized.
yeah.
Right, yeah.
No, I know that, but that was like one step further of alcohol. Like now it's mixed with wormwood and
the amount of Fujo in old absinthe was the demonization politically of that particular.
Could you like elaborate? I'm not familiar with absinthe.
well,
Could
didn't the hell's the artist that he like had different Van Gogh? He had different phases. Like you could see physically the differences in his artwork from when he was just a drunk to when he was in his like.
I mean, I know him as a guy who made art and then cut off his ear.
Yeah, but that was for a hooker, and that's what true love is.
I mean, I might do the same thing, but
with us. But you know, with absinthe, if I remember, and I might fuck this up, so don't come for me. But
they
it
will.
was literally, particularly in France at the time. I can't remember what it was a competing liquor. And at the time, like the bourgeoisie was very into the lifestyle of the absinthe bar.
Yeah, it had its own persona to it. It was like a house nowadays.
Around it.
Yes.
Okay.
And this is also leading like close times, like revolution and stuff like that. And it was literally, and I wish I had the full information on hand to tell you, but look it up. It's actually quite interesting. It was a full smear campaign against absinthe.
Governments do like to kind of like, demonize a specific liquor. And
Like Reefer Madness. if
Okay.
you will.
Yeah.
It was.
But absinthe
But
was a
100
high caliber alcohol at
Yes.
base already. Like it was a high proof.
55%.
Really? That's all it was? I
Oh,
thought
yeah,
it was higher than that.
But it was also because
Which is still high considering most alcohols are 40.
But I mean, we drink liquor all the time that's 50%.
Well, most of them are like 40 to 44
it was a governmental
generally.
thing
I mean,
with
most, yeah,
outside
but one or the
interests,
other.
very akin to like Reefer Madness, like when William Randolph Hearst.
whenever government gets involved,
Yes.
it likes to,
Yes.
it steps on one alcohol and builds up another
Yeah,
for some
absolute
reason.
power corrupts
And it's funny
absolutely.
because it's actually one of the best representations of like political cartoons had to deal with the absinthe situation at that time. That's where you get the Green Fairy aspect from it and all that stuff like that. Yeah. Like I said, I wish I knew more details about it. It's something that I read years ago and I don't fully remember. But if you look it up, I'm sure you'll find it very interesting.
Actually, it's a nice segue, only because I love how whenever the government likes to stomp on an alcohol, it fucks everything up.
Go figure.
I apologize. That's the wrong way to go, but that's the thing that makes me most excited. Yeah,
I want you to elaborate further.
Well, I was going to say a lot of that is still steeped in the history of alcohol, just because I'm probably just blanking on the ingredient. But I think it was Italy that had like a complete, like, absolute control over. I think it was Groot or something like that. I'm blanking actually on it. But then, they discovered. I think it was hops. They put that into beer, and it just
they wanted to make hops illegal into
and they made it illegal because they had the stranglehold on it. But the problem was with open trade because now beer was able to like go throughout the world. It's like, no, you're just completely like undone. Your stranglehold on the beer market is gone now.
Yeah.
And that was that's one of those things that is has a lot to do with in terms of like the history of alcohol, because I mean, I chastised you for bringing this man up, but Hitler would have meetings at pubs, and you discuss.
It wasn't called the beer hall putsch for nothing.
As Americans, we did the same damn thing.
Yeah, we absolutely did.
That's where you met. That's why the church had a lot of problems. Well, in my opinion, why the church had a lot of problems with inns and taverns is because that's where people were meeting instead of the church.
Well, big time here in the United States, temperance movement with more anglicized religions, Christian religions.
And a lot of that was sparked too because we've been talking a good deal about alcohol, but there was an ignorance that alcohol was actually in alcoholic drinks, and they didn't know what it did to the body.
Right.
And then they were like, "Oh, hey, this is flammable," and people were like, "Aghast!" Like, we're putting this into our bodies, and beer somehow escaped that for a long, long time because there's actually like propaganda posters of someone like a man picking up like a pillar or a tree. I can't remember what it was, but he's like, "Oh no, just have a beer at lunch," and all of a sudden you do all this fucking work.
But also, it's easier to make a Molotov cocktail with a bottle of liquor than it is a bottle of beer.
Which is exactly what the government does not want.
God, if you make Molotovs out of Budweiser's, holy cow.
Yeah. That's a good bud.
Let me know. Yeah.
That bud's on me.
But before you could distill, your beers and your alcohols were weaker. It's not until you could distill when it became stronger.
Yeah.
The government's okay when you can have a beer. It's not okay when you can have something a little bit stronger sometimes.
And, we've been talking a lot about beer, but like distillation is, it enters a whole different paradigm at that point. Yeah. So, you go ahead.
I was going to chime in. It's on the historical note, and it's just something that I've found so interesting for like the time that I've spent like just enjoying history and
drinking.
And drinking. Yeah. Middle Eastern history is something that I've always had a fascination with. So I already mentioned before that the origination of distillation that happened in the Persian Empire, I believe it's something around like 800, 700, something like that. Don't quote me on it, but it is what it is. First of all, on the one hand, it's that within modern Islam, despite that that's the dominant force that existed there, drinking alcohol in general, any consumption of it, is considered to be taboo.
Yes.
Which is just by itself an interesting phenomenon.
Can I jump in real quick and then
Please
continue?
do.
I have so much respect for a religion or culture that's going to say drinking is a no-go. And I know a lot of guys like that, and they will not touch alcohol. And for me, and most of the people I know, you guys included, that's the worst thing you could possibly ever say. These guys are so legitimate, and I have no idea how they live their lives.
Yeah.
So much respect.
Now, I could get on board with any religion, but once you cross that line of no alcohol, I'm out.
That's why you're going to burn in a fire. Please continue.
That's probably because of the ethanol.
You ruined it.
I forget where I was going.
Sorry.
Well, good night, folks.
Good night, folks.
You were talking about how like the generation from the part of the world, like where like Islam, it's
without wherever I was going with it, the nuance of how it is lost to a degree, the notion of the value that we have in that, and now I will bring myself back to that point, the way in which we lose that, I guess, let's say. So in other words, this particular culture, your Persian culture, you create the liquor, essentially, and people enjoy it. And then over time, you kind of throw that to the wind. Do you feel like it's too adulterous for your culture? It's not furthering the goals that you have. And then you have individual cultures that exist within your own. And so I think of there's multiple different sets of Islam that most people don't know about in this country.
People just think it's one flavor.
Right.
I just looked it up, and the reason that they prohibit the alcohol is because of the same reason that we have like age limits on alcohol and other things. It's because it's harmful to health.
Right.
And
contrary to what your average American thinks, indeed you are correct. It's that Islam prohibits it for the same reason as Jews and Christians do. It's just that changed over time. And we don't remember Right.
And the Christians would want to, except that they kind of bought Jesus on changing water into wine and making it part of the sacrament. You can't backtrack on that.
Right,
you can't take that back once you say it.
Well, that's what makes Catholicism so alluring. It's like, I'll believe into this guy who can make bread from himself and fucking
he didn't make whiskey.
Dripping with wine.
So there's, and somebody's going to have to look this up for me, but only because I've been drinking. But there is a sect of Islam. In which
I don't know the name, but I know what you're talking about.
The notion of it is that it takes it's What's that?
That allows alcohol?
It not only allows alcohol,
It's
but
like
encourages.
sacramental.
Yeah, it encourages
Yeah.
it. And so part of it is it's related to like the spinning culture of Egypt and which
Eloites, I might be saying that. I might be mispronouncing it. They're not French.
Yes, those people are from the coast of Syria.
Yeah.
That's not what I'm thinking of. Regardless of that, one of the things that I've always like remembered, I guess, like, you know, despite not being religious myself, one of the things that I took away from it and really enjoyed is that, so it's a sect of Shiite Islam, and so Shiite in English.
Sufism?
What's that?
Sufism or Aleve?
Oh, it's Sufis.
Yeah.
Yes, that is what I was thinking of. Thank you. So Sufi Islam, within that, oh, is this like a whole breakdown of it? Thank you.
Sorry.
Oh, that's the Alawatis. I already know about that. Sufi Islam, besides that they have like, so there's a nuance to this that I'll dive into in a second, but the gist of one of their core tenets is that if you need to make a serious decision, like the one that's going to affect your life, then you should make it sober. Don't be drunk, right? Yeah. That's something that I think we would all agree with.
Yeah.
I would, yes.
Right? But then they also have a second aspect, which is that if you have to make a serious decision,
I love subtext.
make it drunk.
That actually comes from a Greek argument.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is the same exact thing.
It's an ancient version.
Make a decision when you're drunk, make it again when you're sober, and if they align, it's a good decision.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The tenet of it is that you should make it twice. If you feel the same way, whether you're drunk or sober, then it's the right decision.
So I have to make
you don't feel that
decisions
way,
when I'm
then-
sober?
And
I don't know if I can
when
do
you're
that.
sober,
Yeah,
and
that's
again
wrong.
when you're drunk.
I'm not going to
make
do
the
that.
decision to go buy the alcohol, and then once you're drunk, then make the decision.
It's a lot of steps. I'm just doing them drunk.
In fairness, it's at least one extra step. That's fair. Yeah, but I love that. The notion of, because I mean, not for nothing, I'm speaking in practicality as much as I throw myself under the bus here. It's that I've made many decisions when I was wasted. And then like the next day I'm like, I don't hate that, but it probably wasn't the best decision.
It's funny too, like not to go, because we can do this for hours and be incredibly boring, but for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, the Catholic Church and then its own separatist anglicized versions that separated over time, and how much drinking affected all of that through European history.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not worth going into. It's incredibly boring.
There's,
But, like,
I mean, you must be drunk as
You
fuck
think
to
it's-
think that somebody found a Bible in a hat.
That's a different story. That's a whole bug.
But, you know, you look at how drunk Churchill was.
Yeah. Oh,
yeah.
It's their magic underwear.
yeah. His day full of whiskey soda, if you will.
I would say this then to bring it back to the history of drinking, and also, of course, I'm throwing in my own vibe with it. It's that people did this thing, this hobby that we have, this inebriation that people enjoy. People have done this for thousands and thousands of years, and very much so allowed it and chose for it to sculpt their decision making. And did they do it to the infinite degree? Certainly not.
Some have and some haven't. It's it's run the full
But
gamut
that there's a merit, there's a merit in doing it that way. In other words, and I would say this, it's like, what do you gain by being affected by alcohol? And you can extrapolate that to any type of a drug. I mean, for myself, it's certainly alcohol. But the idea that perhaps your sober mind is not the only mind that you should entertain, that you should engage with.
And it's interesting because like any of the old religions, say it's Christianity, Judaism, Buddhism, any of these, they almost always have some sect that uses
exactly.
alcohol as like a sacrament.
Yeah. Alcohol or something different. Yeah.
And there's a level of personal responsibility. I mean, it's a far cry for me to ever reach for an area where I'm not drinking. I mean, when I'm working, I'm not
This
drinking.
is why you're on the podcast.
But most, you're right here because I'm very friendly. But I mean, that's how people usually lived.
Yeah.
But I mean, not to the level. There's a level of drinking too much where you can't function. But there's another happy area where you figure out for yourself and you do what you have to do and you live your life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, there's that aspect of it too, that it's a tribal thing. So you drink among your tribe. We do a podcast where we drink as a tribe.
This is my tribe.
That's a great point. That's the one thing when you asked me to be on here, this is the one thing I wanted to say. It's where drinking communally has brought more people together than anything you have ever done. More than the church, more than any common belief system. People coming together and drinking and sharing ideas is one of the most important things that we have done as a species. I will not even say as an American.
I completely
fight
agree
that.
with this.
As human beings, you are 100% right. We have gone from the campfires to monasteries to the pub. Then we lost the pub, and the pub came back.
Yeah, it is like our true social lubrication. It is a social endeavor.
You're free to talk.
Yeah.
There's more. You're more trusting.
Yeah.
You're engaging.
It lowers your inhibition.
Yeah.
So
And that's important. That's a high value.
Yeah.
because you're freer to talk.
Yeah.
And that's going back to the revolutionary times where they discussed the plans of bars
Yeah.
and the Hitler Party.
And
You're a little bit more willing to have those conversations. Now, in the later example, those are bad things to talk about.
Well, they're not always good decisions.
To just extrapolate a little bit on that, just because I want to dive into like the anthropology of it, is that human beings have a natural tendency towards distrust, towards behaviors that we ourselves don't find favorable, that we frown upon them. And we have that because it's clearly advantageous, evolutionarily speaking.
Oh, yeah.
Humans are apex predators.
It is.
But that alcohol is the thing that human beings use to basically to
it releases that.
Yeah.
Because then I can
It's
engage
the
you.
means
You're
by
drunk,
which,
I'm
yeah.
drunk. We could actually talk a little bit. I trust you a little bit more.
Yeah.
You trust me a little bit more.
And see, then that's the interesting facet of it. It's that human beings being so naturally distrusting, being apex predators, being violent, which is, whether you want to view that as positive or negative, whatever, but that's the truth of it. And that's clear to see, right? But the person that you choose to drink with is also the person that you trust. And you need to now abandon this thing that is so built into you. And nature does not provide you with the means to just abandon
And that's
your violent tendencies.
And that's how society is built.
But nature provided us with the ability to make alcohol. That's exactly.
Oh my God. I didn't realize you were so religious.
I found my religion here in a bottle.
The thing is that like alcohol has been, at least in the United States, has been banned and brought back.
Sure.
And as more of a kind of a placation for the masses, even though it is the same thing that created the revolution of.
I think they sell it as a placation, but I feel like the government at some point realizes we're not going to control this. We've tried it and we fucked it up.
Not to control like the consumption of it, but like people are debatably easier to manipulate if they're drunk than when they're not. Because a clearer thinking person is going to ask questions where a drunk person is just going to say whatever the fuck.
I think the challenge with that is that, yes, you're more manipulatable when you're inebriated or drunk.
Sure.
But it doesn't mean that the government has that key to manipulate that. It's anybody else around.
And
they've tried that, and they fucked it up every time they
that hasn't
tried.
worked either. But so it's just
What
weird.
We got NASCAR for it.
I'll be honest, I like NASCAR. Thank you, alcohol.
I like Smokey and the Bandit. I don't know if I like NASCAR.
How old are you?
I'm pretty old.
NASCAR, the Kennedys got propped up, all kinds of things. But we won't go there tonight, sorry.
So, in my trip to Ireland, I had gone to a number of factories. I went to the Guinness factory. I went to the Jameson. It's called the Middleton Distillery, but it's where they make Jameson.
I thought they did that at the same place.
And then I also went
Guinness and the Jameson.
it's the Dingle Distillery, and they make gin and whiskey and stuff like that there. I thought it was so interesting when I did the Middleton tour, because the very beginning, they hit you with this kind of pseudo-history lesson, and they're like, oh, and this almost never happened. And I was just like, I want to raise my hand. And I'm like, so there's this whole like alternate timeline where whiskey, just the Jameson and all these other brands that are like, they don't exist. Can we dive into that? I don't want to know how this is made anymore.
Was it in an accident that Jameson came into creation?
I believe what the story is, and it's been a few
I don't know the truth.
I think it was that they were all kind of like failing, so they all joined together to do the one distillery so they could survive.
Did you happen to have any Putin while you were there?
I don't think so.
What is Putin?
You know what Putin is.
Besides a Russian.
So, I don't have the right inflection. I'm not Irish, but it's essentially their moonshine. It was made by monks way back in the day. The first like Catholic monks to come over made.
I had it. It was great.
That was essentially.
That is just like a moonshine.
Everclear.
I'm gonna try that.
Yeah, but like they have like as we talk about like Appalachian Hill moonshiners, they talk about the old monks making Putin or poutine.
Yeah,
I don't want to.
No,
I always
poutine is that Canadian French fry dish.
Yeah.
But
They say that it's closer to like Putin. Yeah.
No, I didn't get a chance to try that. I was in a little bit of a disarray the entire trip. So I had my Guinness, I had my whiskey, and then I would also drink gin because that's my go-to. That's my my starting pitcher, so to speak.
Was there any drink where they actually sold like this is the identity of us?
I would. Well, I mean, for the Dingle tour, I don't know if it's the name of the.
you can't help it. It's a natural reaction.
I just got like dick and fart
It's like a
jokes and Zelda jokes.
Like gin and vodka are kind of like they made gin and vodka because it's faster to make than whiskey because you have to age whiskey.
Exactly.
Were they introduced to vodka, or did they like make it on?
They already
their
knew
own
the
merit?
distillation. They just didn't have the ingredients.
So like they had their Putin, which is a clear grain alcohol.
Oh, and they just called it.
They should have stopped there, but they didn't. They wanted some flavor.
Yeah.
Good for them.
So that
I'm sure
was
known for flavor.
that was sort of like the identity of the town of Dingle. It's like, all right, we have these vodkas, we have these gins, and like the whiskeys are kind of like on the back shelf because they haven't aged yet to actually become a proper whiskey. So that was actually my big go-to. It was like once I realized, oh, I'm allowed to drink gin in Ireland because they make it here. I'm doing that.
No, definitely don't bring up any beef here.
It's funny because I always thought this gin as being like an English London drink.
That's what I would.
So if people are going to enjoy it in Ireland, I almost feel like it's a race train.
All right, so as a quick intercession, when I went to Amsterdam, so gin, Amsterdam is famous for Genever, which is the precursor to gin. Okay. And we went to the actual distillery where it started in like 1300s or whatever, the Boll distillery. And it's
the glass.
It's clear grain liquor, high proofed, which is jammed all the botanicals they can get out of the fucking, Indies and jammed it in there. And it's the precursor to gin.
That's how I always imagine, just like all alcohols, like they're all based out of somewhere specific. Like vodka, I give to kind of all of Europe and like East or Northern Asia.
You just made Putin happy. Unhappy.
Oh, that's
made him sad.
I'll need that soon. And where gin would be more of our like Amsterdam-y kind of Eastern blocky thing, rums in the south.
It's associated
like, that's what I'm, at least from my American point of view. Like, every place has kind of something that they did as far as an alcohol goes.
Oh, what's your mass fermentable product?
Right, yeah.
It'd be, potato grain, which everybody kind of has.
If you're
Grain or in South America,
or agave, like cacti, yeah.
Sugarcane.
Or sugarcane, yeah.
Bottom line is that every single group of human beings around this entire planet has figured out a way to take the thing that they had in abundance and make it into a psychedelic product, which is what we're talking about.
Yeah.
But alcohol is a psychedelic product because humans like to exit the reality that they experience every day, and they want to experience a different one. And that's really the nature of it. And that happens to be a type of exit that we find to be culturally, governmentally acceptable, whereas all the other exits are illegal.
So the reason for life is to get fucked up.
Well, as a man with sunglasses on, I can't help but agree with you.
Well.
And for some reason, I can't trust you.
It's probably because you're not drunk enough.
I'll never
that
be
man
that drunk.
another doo-doo.
All right, can you actually fully explain this doo-doo thing?
The yes.
Yeah, because you've said it a few times, I didn't want to ask.
Well,
I was getting his phone out for it.
yeah, I gotta, like, because I don't remember things so good.
You made it a whole thing that we had to stop and get Mountain Dew on the way.
You can't be saying stuff that often and not remember why you're saying it.
Well,
I guess you can.
I beg to differ. We just talked the whole podcast.
Look at your
about
phone and make the answer.
it. I gotta look it up again because I was looking up other things. Like,
Is that wrong?
I don't know.
so Mountain Dew, there were two brothers who,
We're two brothers.
yeah, you
Why
are.
couldn't
Maybe it was you guys, but they had, there was a mixer that they enjoyed, but they couldn't get it in
Are they brothers or homosexuals? Like, what's...
why?
Are they brothers or are they brothers?
No, they I believe they were white.
Oh, shit. We just got called out.
I'll say it.
You were safe until you said something.
But they were trying to recreate a mixer that they had where they were living, where they moved to. I forget if they were in Louisiana or they had moved to Louisiana, where they had this like lemon lime kind of drink that they would mix. And
Squirt?
This is a train wreck that just kept crashing into itself.
and so they were trying to create it. They called it Mountain Dew because that was the like a euphemism for whiskey.
Yes.
Or moonshine.
Moonshine.
Drink a lot of
in certain
Mountain Dew.
In certain areas,
Never turned into whiskey.
and that's how it. And then it just kind of steamrolled from there with PepsiCo.
And
Eventually,
the gist of it is that you can mix Mountain Dew with whiskey, and that's a drink that has a name, doesn't have a name.
I don't. Well, no, I created that name, the Doo-Doo, just because we were using Dewar's scotch to.
I was the one to introduce the
Yeah.
viewers.
Oh no, yeah, that's your fault.
That is.
I apologize because it's during the podcast. When I was younger, I used to drink Mountain Dew all the time, and because I always thought it would lower my sperm count. And
That's why you drink it?
Yes, 100%.
I mean, I get that.
I get it.
Like prophylactic.
Yeah.
You can also make.
I was.
Did it work?
I would. Well, I don't have
No
kids. So
kids. You're not an uncle. Well, I guess you kind of are, but that's
that's
not.
not how it works. What are you born in like Louisiana? Jeez.
You have a child,
Yeah.
and you become an.
Oh my God! Did your sister have a kid? Is it yours?
No, I forgot he had a sister.
I'm sorry. I don't want to make Dan upset.
It's funny. So like I haven't had, and I still have abstained tonight. I will not be trying your Mountain Dew.
It's not bad. I don't think it's like it's in the description that I,
I
read.
love
it
that
was
he's trying to
sort of-
convince you right now.
It was kind of.
I love that you had a whole history contact on alcohol, and you never talked about the Prohibition.
Oh, was that a thing?
Well, we glanced it. We glanced it a little.
Yeah,
bit.
but everybody knows about that.
And I brought up the reason why
Yeah.
it was effectively done is
Yeah.
because they did the whole scary tactic. They're like,
Yeah, it was like the war on drugs.
I'm sorry. Let's call it what it is. You get those crazy temperance ladies going into ale houses, breaking everything up with hammers.
It was Nancy Reagan before
were
Nancy
free
Reagan was around.
interesting.
I'm not wrong.
Yeah, you're right.
I think you're kind of wrong.
No, drugs are bad. You're right.
But yeah, I mean, we could do like whatever. We could spend a whole bunch of time going on to Prohibition time, Rough Runners, all that stuff.
We
But,
could-
like, it didn't work.
Everybody's talked about it.
Yeah.
We could talk about how, because I read the book, so it's fresh in my mind, how like the bastardization of beer kind of like led to the homebrew uptick. So there's a whole bunch of things. We could spend like another hour talking about the history.
I'm glad you didn't because it's so overdone. It's like kind of the go-to, so I'm glad that didn't come up.
Nancy Reagan reminded me of the fact that I have these cigarettes here.
Wasn't she about reading?
This is probably
It was about
This is where all
Nancy Reagan was about reading.
Every
Yeah,
video
go get 'em.
game in the 80s and 90s had this thing on the screen that said, dare to.
I was drunk at the time.
cigarettes, and I will show them to the camera.
Are you smoking
Right?
these?
They're amazing. Let me just.
Can you
Look, I'm not going to open them at all because you're not allowed to smoke them. But what we have right here, these are gifts from friends,
Yeah.
right? These are 2 packs of cigarettes on the note, once again, of Nancy Reagan. These are from, I'm going to show those off right there. Right?
Yeah.
These are cigarettes that
They
were
are.
given to you that were given to you when you got off of Marine One, going to visit
I
The White
understand
House.
now why that person complained about why you take you so long to talk about shit. They came off of Marine One. These are cigarettes.
Yeah,
I'm
but look at the
sorry.
bottom. Look, they have the crest, but look what they actually are.
They're Winston's, aren't they?
I don't know what they
Or
are.
cool.
They're from the
You could have
price.
just said that.
I
I'm sorry.
I could have done that, but I like to lead you on.
I'm sorry, Dan.
And you're a guest here, and I will massage your shoulders until you tell me
I
to
like
stop.
it. I
Just like every other guest.
The menthol ones are cools.
Which is really amazing.
Are they called menthol ones?
I have no, I don't think so. Here,
Because that's
How strong
Don't
do
look
you
at
think
them.
they are in there?
that one's from Nixon. This one is from goddamn, what's his fucking
You see
name?
Reagan?
Reagan.
Yeah.
Yeah,
They're
from-
Class A's. That's
well, of course they are. That's from Richmond, Virginia,
actually.
where all cigarettes are made.
Bottom line, giving out cigarettes when you got off of Marine One, that was banned by Nancy Reagan
Nancy Reagan.
So now it would be veggie
because those would be probably
carrot sticks.
she actually replaced it with candy.
Candy. Yep.
Like
Yes, you
Twix,
get
Snickers.
candy. I don't think that it's that
It was
good.
probably
though.
just like
It's peppermint, so
Smarties
she's
or.
like a-
I have never been on Marine One, contrary to what you might think of me.
Honestly, I feel like you would know.
Yeah. Bottom
What do you
line is
say,
it's all in the matter of perception of what you think is dangerous or not. And here we find ourselves with alcohol.
You know what I can tell you is dangerous? Driving in Ireland.
Yeah.
Oh.
I thought I was going to say not subscribing to this
I've done
podcast.
that.
It's on the left side, but the steering wheel's on the right side.
Yeah.
And all the lanes are so small that Moses himself probably couldn't walk by them.
Yeah.
It's like you could.
It's like driving in Lakewood.
I've been
Yeah,
on
it
it.
is. It's not fun.
How long were you there for?
I was there for 8 days. Went to Dublin for 2 days, Cork for another 2, and the aforementioned Dingle.
How were they with?
Unky Dan from Dingle.
How were they with
like
like
that.
tourists? You know, like were they cool with you?
Oh, they were absolutely pleasant. I had a couple of lovely conversations with a few Irish folk there. It was a good time.
You got laid?
Was that?
You get laid over there by some.
We're still on camera.
I didn't ask you to show me.
She touched me here.
Can we get the mannequin up?
Show me on the cigarette pack where you were touched, Unky Dan.
But no, that's good. I'm glad that you went and you had a good.
Especially as you go for like a larger amount of time. Sometimes you go to a place you don't really get to experience.
Yeah,
Like, did you feel like you got to experience it?
I got to experience. I feel like once I got out of Dublin,
You're good.
I got to see the the layout, the landscape of Ireland. Because I was into like Dublin to me. First of all, it was like pretty Americanized. Like the way that celebrating St. Patrick's Day is more akin to the way that we celebrate St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
No, I love seeing like.
Wait, they have St. Patrick's Day?
Yeah, I was under the impression they didn't give too much of a
I feel
shit
like
about it.
God, that ruins my mindset because I feel like if they did, it was like a conquered people. Like, is that their thing?
I mean,
I feel like that's an
conquered
American
people?
thing.
they've kind of turned into like their 4th of July. They've kind of turned into
In
their
some
Independence
ways.
Day.
Like,
There was a
snakes
whole lot
there?
of like Irish flags all over the place. So I like that. But just like, it's so much was, in my opinion, Americanized just because there's so much American music being played there. And
I feel like
because that's
tourism can kind of ruin.
Was it all House of Pain and Flogging Molly?
well, first of all, Flogging Molly's actually from Ireland. So that does count.
Sounds offended.
Listen, I'm just trying to say that I wanted to hear Irish music, okay? All I got was like, I got Tell Me Ma, which is a traditional Irish song, and I got The Wild Broker.
Yep, the one.
And that's a great song.
Yeah.
So I feel like it should have been inconvenient for me, the amount of traditional Irish music being played at me. But I don't know. I was like, oh no, I'll get to hear CCR for the second time.
You should come to the warehouse. I'll tell them please. The fucking Irish.
I know.
I haven't been to Ireland, and like someday I will go. But Christina went a couple of years ago, but she did it in like the hard way. She went and hiked the entire Wicklow Way, which took like I don't know over a week. And
Yeah.
That's what, like the equivalent of walking the Appalachian Trail or something like that.
Oh, no, visit America.
Village to village and stay overnight in the village.
God, she's
walked
hardcore.
all day to the next one.
Man, fuck
And all
that.
day to I think when she went on the ship, she didn't exactly know what it was. But
Wandering.
Man, I don't like getting up to go to the fucking fridge.
and it was rainy, and like you're supposed to come up on these bluffs and see great sights, but it was just foggy the entire time.
That's what I always imagined Ireland to be. It was like just a beautiful Seattle where it's just always raining, but it's actually pretty.
Well, that was the great thing about my trip. It only rained on like the last like travel day that we had.
No,
That's
So
not
we
bad.
really lucked out with the weather. It was kind of just like just a little chilly, but not too bad. Like I was able to bring I brought one like sweatshirt with me, and that worked out well.
What was the temperature like?
It was like in the high 50s, low 60s.
That's not terrible, really, yeah.
Good for him.
What was the like if for somebody like I'm never gonna leave my dogs. So but if there's dogs
They're support animals.
100%. But what was the best place? Like if somebody's gonna go for like a day or two, what should they do?
In my opinion, so I'm a little bit different. So like Dublin and Cork to me didn't seem like Ireland, but once I got to Dingle, again, I know, funny
No,
name.
let it go.
That to me kind of seemed like it was more Ireland. Just
That was the place.
you walk down the street and you're like, oh, this place is a hardware store, and it's also a pub.
I
love that where the pub is like secondary.
Yeah.
Like you have the like there's no place that is a place to drink. It's just you can go to a
It's
place and
everywhere.
have a drink.
Every place offers
commonplace
beer
as
or booze,
accepted.
but
Yeah, it's that to me just spoke like because again, my family comes from Ireland, so I wanted to like imbibe that culture. And when I was in Dublin, I'm like, you're just Boston.
And you were there for how long?
8 days. 8 days. And it was
a
not
decent amount of time.
because you get to like spend a few days in like Dublin, a few
That
days.
is a
in Cork.
solid amount of time.
Yeah. And also I was there with family, so you know.
No, like,
So there's that.
I mean, it all depends on the family, but
I will say this though. My cousin Megan absolutely did a fucking yeoman's job of creating like an itinerary. Like, she, like,
Good job.
Was it good like Megan? And also your Navy is showing you, but but yeah, 100%.
she wrote up like an entire itinerary, like things to do in Dublin, things to do in Cork, things to do in
Yeah, you need somebody for that.
And I was just like, she should be a travel agent. But you know, it was a great trip.
That's awesome.
And I get that, and that type of person is so important.
Yeah.
If that's what you need
Yeah.
to do.
Yeah.
That's where other
Somebody
people like
has to do
me
it.
get to enjoy a vacation when there's somebody else who's going to step up and do all the logistics.
Yep. And she did a great job, and it helped me out because there were times where I was like by myself and all that stuff. So I'm like, oh, maybe I'll just go here or there.
Yeah.
So it was a good time. And honestly, if I go back to Ireland, I might use that itinerary again. And what you should
Or
do,
you can call Megan. I'm sorry.
and what you should do is subscribe to this podcast. You can leave us a 5-star review on Spotify. I think you can also do that on Apple as well. You can leave us a comment on both those platforms. Also, this is video podcast now, so you should be subscribing to us on YouTube and Rumble. Make sure that you give us a like. Leave a comment. You can make fun of Pete for wearing sunglasses. You can also make fun of Moses for wearing sunglasses the entire damn
I'm
time.
doing you a favor.
Get after all of us.
You can also make fun of me for being Unky Dan from Dingle.
And we will.
Yeah, Dingle Dan.
You can also check out our home base, loudandrunk.com. You can catch up on the podcast there. You can check out some cool merch, which we are doing a piss poor job of representing.
Yeah,
So let's
that's
get on
true. We've had a couple of orders of late, and
Yep.
like you know, there's some neat shit on there. There's
We'll show you-
some
we'll
pint
show you next
glasses and t-shirts and whatnot.
Yeah.
Moses, have you been checking on the email, by the way?
Not at all.
You can also brand Moses our content.
Man, nobody contacts, so this is like whatever, dude.
We're also on social media. We're on X. We're also on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And I think that's it. I think that's all the
That's
things
it.
that we
That's
I
all
need to
the
plug
things, huh?
for the end of this podcast.
Wow.
Yeah, you should give us a like though on YouTube and also subscribe because my
'Cause we
life
like you.
is a living hell trying to get that thing going.
We're doing it.
So for Justin, Ed, thank you very much for joining
Yes,
us.
thank you, Ed.
Thank you for having me.
Keep coming back. It works if you work it,
I'll come.
and I'll watch.
Keep moving. Keep moving.
Pedro, Moses, I'm Dan, and until next time, Salasha.
Sláinte.
Launch it.